report. I did a little more ranting than I probably should have, but we're going to bring on G. Edward Griffin back, and of course Pete Fedek will be back on Tuesdays and Thursdays every week, so Pete will be back here to talk about carrot bars. If we don't have a vision, just like Moses had the vision of what the people needed to have in order to go to the land of Canaan, the land given to them by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, by God, the everlasting God, the Yeshua, then if we don't have a vision for the future, we won't have one. If we don't have a plan to disconnect from the system, whether it's disconnected from the healthcare system, we're not going to have health. If you are not your primary care provider and you succumb to the foolishness of thinking that the government's going to take care of you, your primary care doctor is going to take care of you because he's going to fill you up with drugs and say, I'm going to deal with this problem and pop another pill on you, and if he fails, he's not going to take the blame for your failure. He's going to blame you because you aren't compliant, or it's not his fault that he popped you full of 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 drugs. But the fact is, he doesn't approach your physiology like an engineering or nonlinear engineering problem. He approaches it if you have a symptom, because he's ultimately a salesman for the drug companies, which is why medical doctors are trained as technicians and not as scientists. And if they had to defend a master's or PhD level thesis, probably 2% would pass their master's level. That's the facts. I know, having a equivalent PhD thesis research done before I went to medical school, that most medical students absorb and regurgitate, and they get high scores only for telling the professor exactly what they were told in class, not asking tough questions to question the thesis behind it. So with that intro, we have, back in the program, we have Dr. Bob Dennis and Micropulse. Dr. Bob, you're there. Hello, hello. I can't hear Dr. Bob. Is Dr. Bob there? Okay. Or actually, no. We have Chris Jackson. Chris Jackson, go ahead. Are you there, Chris? We lost him. Okay. Well, we're going to bring Chris back. Chris Jackson, we're talking about VibraSlim, and of course the program I put together, I'm actually going to put together kind of informational slides and some of the pieces of it. I recommend that no matter what other exercise you do, I don't care if you're a power lifter, runner, cyclist, whatever, you need to do VibraFit. VibraFit. And the reason for it is the primary deficit in all exercise program is called gravity, vitamin G, I call it, gravity, because it stimulates the production of collagen, elastin, hyaluronic acid. It stimulates the increased bone density by compressing the piezoelectric bone crystals, so you regenerate and create stronger bones. And it also stimulates the release of growth hormone, endorphins that make you have a better attitude toward what's going on in your life, and improve your mood. But it also pumps your lymphatics better than anything. And of course, both people realize the third pathway for detox, first is liver, second is kidneys, third is lymphatics. The only thing that will pump your lymphatics is the two following: vibrational exercise and hyperbaric oxygen therapy, like mild hyperbaric chamber. Because the pressure changes pump your lymphatics, but if you do both, VibraFit, and that means getting body elastic bands and getting adjustable small weights for a woman, maybe up to 20 pounds, for a man up to 50 pounds, and using those adjustable body elastic bands. And I recommend one of these athletic bars bolted to the ceiling behind, which is one of the gymnastic bars, so you can put your bands up there so you can pull from above and behind. You can do exercise down below. You can stand on bands and pull up. And the vibrational exercise, 10 minutes of it, has the biological effects of 1 hour of aerobics. Now, there's a lot of research on it that aerobic activity actually doesn't increase your heart function, and doesn't increase your heart size or health, and doesn't increase your lung health. What it does do, especially in women, is it actually demineralizes your bones. So beyond a moderate amount of exercise, which is probably best walking rather than running, a moderate amount, the best exercise is to do what's called training, where you actually go to a max for a period of so many seconds, and then have a rest period, and then go to a max again. That cyclic period stimulates enzymes to increase your body's oxygen carrying capacity, your tissue regeneration, and your healing, whereas prolonged aerobic activity is very deleterious. It actually shrinks your heart and damages your lungs. And your lung tissue is one of the limiting factors to how long you're going to live. So I tell people, VibraFit, the vibrational platform is, if you go to our vibrational VibraSlim icon under Associates, in the United States, it's including delivery, $1,299. And there's no equipment to buy, other than getting, say, for, I think, under $50, a body elastic bands and maybe another $30 to get some adjustable weights. That's it. You don't need to buy a club membership. You don't need to have the excuse of, I can't drive there because of good or bad weather. It doesn't take up much space. And it's not going to be misused like a treadmill or one of these other orbital exercises where people just aren't going to get the full body benefits of vibrational exercise. You're going to get more fat loss, especially cellulite. You're going to lower insulin resistance more. You're going to release more nitric oxide. In fact, the most powerful releasers of nitric oxide are supernox, combined with gamma E+, and of course the supernox works along with our cardiovasc to release nitric oxide, cardiovasc and supernox, vibrational exercise, and mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Vibrational exercise is the most powerful biological stimulus for nitric oxide, as well as mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And I was reading some articles this morning, actually. It was quite interesting that virtually all, if you want to call it virtually all, diseases are basically a form of hypoxia. Even diabetes, for example, when you get diabetic, you get cross-link of the heme pulp molecules, so you can't have the proper carrying capacity of oxygen in your body. The enzymes get cross-linked, and you end up with the inability to convert sugar or glucose to pyruvate to create electrons to create ATP and NADH. So your cells act like they're hypoxic. So that's why we add NADH, D-ribose, ALC-1000, Sports Energy Light, and to our special drink. In fact, I have a drink of that right on my table right now. You can hear the clink as I put it down. That includes Sports Energy Light, D-ribose, ALC-1000, and I have my NADH tablets right here beside it. What you have to understand is that vibrational exercise, no matter what else you're doing, whether it's a grandmother trying to rebuild your bones or proprioception so you don't have a fall, or you're an elite athlete and you're trying to build up tensile strength of tissues, or proprioception so you don't have abnormal force vectors around the joint, like a tensor joint like the shoulder, or the powerful rotational forces of the Gegenhalten in German around the knee, you have to have very, very high levels of proprioception so you don't end up with injuries or tears or micro-injuries, and you have proper force vectors around that joint. The same reason why it takes a long time to train someone to become a martial artist, because they're learning how to create high velocities where the tissues not only can tolerate that velocity, whether they're punching, like something really hard, or their bones and ligaments, but also the control of the muscles requires high levels of proprioception, and vibrational exercise does that. So if, for example, when I do my bands, and I can do 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, or whatever level power of bands, and you're doing that exercise, you are recruiting all the A delta and C fibers, A delta and C fibers for sensation, all the slow and fast twitch muscle fibers, stimulating the connective tissues to increase the connective tissue strength and the fibroblasts. So do we have, Chris, are you back? Okay, so I guess Chris Jackson must have got busy. So I tell people, if you're interested in finding out more about VibraSlim in terms of exercise, drop a phone call, drop an email. This is a system. I've worked hard to select what's the best price and the best system you can buy. We ship worldwide. We have warehouses in Europe and over in Asia, so it's a short-term shipment. These are the best made, non-multi-level systems, so you're going to get them at one half.
Very good.
I can hear you.
Good.
Yeah, I guess we've had another what I call DNS attack, which is attacking both my access and my ISDN.
Deary me, who's that coming from, do you think?
NSA.
Okay.
NSA, yeah, because the only one that can actually take down both is the National Security Agency.
Very interesting.
Yeah, because my access is completely separate from my dedicated ISDN. Yeah.
But you're back on. So
Well, we're back on. That's after a very nasty rant that I had with G. Edward Griffin collaborating with me and Pete Fettix. So I guess I've ticked off the powers that be. Good. They need to know I'm coming for them.
very good.
So let's talk about Mountain Red Velvet. What's the latest in terms of Mountain Red Velvet developments?
Well, we still have this new batch going through production. I have to say, it's proving rather challenging. As you know, the Australian regime for dietary supplements, or as they call them over there, therapeutic goods, is pretty exacting. So, I think, are you still there? So we're still working through that. And hello, Dr. Bill. I don't know if you can hear me. All right. All right. Okay, yeah. So, we're working through that with some challenges, but we will get there in the end. And it's beginning to warm up here in New Zealand, so we're beginning to head towards the end of our winter, beginning of spring. So we will be very shortly, I think, beginning to see this incredible change again with deer and what we see, these buttons, which is the residual antler from the previous season, and that tells us that this incredible growth pattern is about to start again. So it's this incredible cyclical change that we see with Mountain Red, that we see with these incredible deer. And as I've said many, many times in this program, that deer velvet, it's a fully sustainable source. This is something that grows every single year. And it's quite an incredible treasure trove, 396 bioactive ingredients. We're talking here about things like growth hormones, we're talking about vitamins, minerals, we're talking about glycosaminoglycans, we're talking about an incredible array of products that just very simply and very naturally, we don't do anything with them. We harvest the deer velvet antler every year, and all we do by means of processing is really remove the water from that. And that then allows us to mill the product into a powder and then put that into a capsule. So when you buy Mountain Red, that's what you get. And one of the questions, Dr. Bill, we've been having from many, many listeners and readers and users of Deer Velvet is they tend to drift off a little bit, and they'll maybe go onto Google or go onto the web and they'll buy some Deer Velvet that is less expensive, and then it comes in the mail, and they look at it in the capsule, and it's a very strange color. It's gray or it's white. Right. Or it's certainly not as dark, and you've seen, Dr. Bill, the quality of the velvet we have.
Campbell, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Yeah, yours is a much higher quality. I know I've seen some of these other products, and they're not that I call we call the fuzz, if you want to call it, or the red deer velvet, which is not the bone and the other stuff. You have to pick it at the right time, harvest at the right time, and have the right product. Plus, you also don't use xylazine because you don't anesthetize your red deer.
Absolutely.
I had somebody, and I like to use the term from O'Reilly because I like this term. It's accurate, but it's not obscene. Is a pinhead sent me information about people that were harvesting it, but it turned out they were harvesting it in Russia. And the Russians have a very vigorous, vicious attitude toward the red deer. I mean, they literally hunt them down almost, and they anesthetize them or pin them down before, it's very nasty what they do. Yours is very gentle. You have a nice dark room. That's right.
And I think when Karen started this company 15 years ago, that was her first and primary goal, was to make sure that no animal was harmed. So we are quite unique in that what we don't do is we don't kill the animals. We don't farm for venison. We farm only for velvet. And we have some of these boys now that have been with us right from the beginning. And as I was saying just in the introduction there, this is a product that we can harvest every single year, and it goes on and it grows and it's completely sustainable. So people shouldn't be worried, and I know that they do see these pictures from other parts of the world where the animal welfare measures are far less than they are here. We all have to be accredited by the New Zealand Veterinary Association, and they can essentially come onto our farm and our facilities, and they can look at that in terms of how we're harvesting the material every year. So be rest assured, these boys are very, very happy, Dr. Bill. They roam wild for most of the year. They come in once or twice a year. We give them, as we call this, haircut. They're literally back out in the paddock within 5 minutes, and they're quite happy because they're no longer carrying around 10 or 20 pounds on their head. So again, it's one of the beauties of velvet. We know that this is a revered substance. It was used by the emperors of China for 2,000-3,000 years. And it was up there with ginseng. They had what they call two imperial herbs. One was ginseng that we all know about, and one was deer velvet. And really they gave it to their emperors for well-being, for rejuvenation, for long life, and for good health. And that's exactly where we are with Mountain Red now. We have many, many people around the globe who are getting regular daily benefit from this product, whether it be for joint support, whether it be for heart support, whether it be for general well-being and energy. And that's one of the first things that people comment on is they start taking this product, they feel better, they feel great, they get more energy, they feel alive.
They've had a lube job of their joints, a spark plugs to their brain have changed, they're detoxing their liver, every organ, their skin, hair, nails becomes lustrous and beautiful. As they say, if you want to not only be beautiful on the outside, but on the inside, you want to take the 1-2 punch of Collagen Max and Mountain Red Velvet, and you're going to see the results in 2 to 3 weeks. It's amazing. And we have Jonathan Rothschild here. We're going to talk about some of the privately labeled ecological formulas that, Jonathan, you've developed over the years. And I was reading this morning one of my journal articles about Dr. Warburg. And, of course, he received the Nobel Prize in Medicine many years ago. And, of course, one of his last articles was 1969. And he made the very bold and correct statement that basically hypoxia is the basis for all degenerative, inflammatory, and infective diseases. And if you look at that in a broader sense, for example, in diabetics, hypoxia means that they've got cross-linked hemoglobin, so they can't carry oxygen, or they have mitochondrial dysfunction that creates, in a sense, the effective hypoxia, which is low electron transport through the cytochromes to create ATP and NADH. What you've done in some of your formulas is you support mitochondrial function, which literally reverses the microorganelle effective hypoxia, which is the basis for pretty well all diseases. We have of course, the mitochondrial catalysts, the IBS care carnitine, which is slow release, the vascu care we call the rapid release, the propionyl L-carnitine form, the uridine, which is a triacyleuridine, NADH, which is nicotine and dinucleotide hydride, D-ribose, and ALC-1000. So let's start off with all these energetic formulas that you've developed, because I tell people, for example, my glass of juice that I have in front of me has D-ribose and has ALC-1000 that you make. It has our sports energy light drink, electrolytes and support. It has all these other components that you've developed. And in my vitamins that I have sitting here, I have a big bag of vitamins I take every day, and then I take some later on in the afternoon and evening. But my main vitamins, and it includes a lot of these components, because people don't realize if you have an illness of any kind, it's ultimately, in a sense, an effective microorganelle hypoxia and electron deficiency. Amazing that you've been working on this area for so long. So tell us a little bit about it.
It's interesting that you mentioned hypoxia, which could be a subclinical issue too. I mean, in its overt clinical state, it's a lack of oxygen going to the cell, and it affects hemoglobin. But there are certain, oxygen is a double-edged sword. You can have oxidation catalysts that destroy cells, and yet physiologically we need oxygen for all life forms. So there's a healthy balance, and we have to respect the feedback loops that occur within the body. And the most important thing is to have the starting materials so that the body is not starved of the nutrients that can help create this kind of balance and protect the mitochondria.
Well, one of the things is research at the Noxic Research Center in Pittsburgh, which is the top one in the world, where they're looking at the idea of what we call oxygen reperfusion, injury actually triggering off, we call the death signal from the mitochondria to tell the cell to die. So if you have a tissue that's reoxygenated too quickly or incorrectly, you actually create free radicals that actually cause the mitochondria to turn on the apoptosis signal to tell the cell to kill itself. And when you maintain electron density, though, those signals are actually blunted. That's why we have things like magnesium taurate, which particularly works for the brain and so on, magnesium glycinate, malate, magnesium L-threonate, or brain mag. And, of course, all these mitochondrial support formulas, a lot of the times the effects of many illnesses whether it's chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic infections, diabetic, peripheral neuropathy, or central nervous system problems where your energy metabolism is being blunted, so your astrocytes can't form a neural network anymore. It all comes back to the mitochondria. I call it the queen of the cell. So you have a lot of, I call queen of the cell formulas. Her Majesty's Royal Jelly to create pro-collagen and help fatty acids be metabolized, and all these other formulas. So let's go through some of them. We call Vascucare propionyl carnitine, IBS Care for the bowel, but has slow-release form of carnitine for other uses also. NADH, which is a very neat tablet. In fact, there's other companies trying to market a D-ribose NADH, which is considerably, I would say, they've raised the price through the ceiling, and there's no need for it. When we give the D-ribose powder and the NADH tablets, our prices are very reasonable, and they don't have weird marketing on it, which I've seen some very strange marketing on these.
Yeah, the body will just absorb them independently and then use it for its own biochemical pathways. And you mentioned the carnitine and mitochondria. Well, the mechanism of action of carnitine, which is a physiologic agent, is to shuttle fatty acids across the mitochondrial membrane. So you could actually be taking all sorts of fish oils and evening primrose and borage and red currant seed oil, and not really utilizing it unless you have the most efficient form of carnitine to shuttle them, where they serve as a substrate for energy metabolism. And this is a third-generation product. The propionyl carnitine was developed in Italy in sports medicine, actually, to help the soccer team. This is not a doping issue. It's a question of utilizing something that's already made in the body and reducing lactic acid or cramping in the muscles, which also has some effect in ischemic heart disease and peripheral occlusive vascular disease, so that you're able to walk many more paces as a result of it. So that's what the propionyl carnitine is all about.
This is one of the reasons why particularly a vegetarian diet or vegan diet is very bad for you if you don't get additional carnitine. So if you want to be on a vegan or vegetarian diet, you got to take additional carnitine.
Yes, and it's the definition of a vitamin is something that the body doesn't synthesize and is required to get an external source of in foods. But in the case of carnitine, it's actually made in the body to a very small extent, but not ideally.
Yeah, it's
so
very
we
tiny.
Need supplemental forms.
Exactly. It's almost like the form of monoatomic iodine and thyroid, which is why we give people Nutridyne. And many other molecules, the body either has a metabolic blockade or because it has a gene SNP or SNP, single nucleotide polymorphism, or it has a toxic blockade, so chemicals, heavy metals, or biotoxins block the enzyme activity. And most people don't realize that there's a gradual degradation of human and life biology of all life forms on Earth. And now we've got radiotoxins, scalar radiation, 10,000 plus chemicals in the body that are many of them halides at parts per million or higher. And unless you get the activated forms of vitamins that jump the gene defect, or you supply enough of a nutrient to overcome the toxic effect of the environment they're living in, cells aren't healthy anymore. Which is why the peak of human intelligence and behavior and sexual differentiation of the sexes has now been reached. And that's why we look at cultures like in Japan, where 40% of the males and females have absolutely no interest in the opposite sex, because they're all being turned into a unisex biologically by toxins. And the most sensitive part of the cell is the mitochondria, 30 times more sensitive to radiation and free radical damage of DNA, the ring chromosome, than regular allelic chromosomes. Plus, the fact is mitochondrial damage, if it occurs, it starts to create free radicals that triggers cell destruction or apoptosis. So it's a double-edged sword. It's pretty bad. And that's why I see the population not realizing it's really not optional anymore to not take supplements on top of a good organic diet and clean filtered water. If you don't take supplements, you cannot optimally express your genetics anymore. It's not possible.
And that is something that we all have to face. I mean, we're lucky to live in a day and age where supplements are isolated, synthesized, and are available inexpensively.
Right. Now, what about ALC-1000 and D-ribose? These are really cool. And I like the ALC-1000 D-ribose and NADH. This combination with the carnitine, Vascucare, and IBS Care are amazing. And
Well, they're all involved in electron transport. And if you look at, why so many people get fatigue, which is the most common patient complaint, it's because on a bioenergetic level, the cells are not working optimally. And you need the starting material in order, it's like feeding your cells, not just your body. And that's why you need these specialized nutrients.
Exactly. Amazing. Doing some amazing work, Jonathan. Back in a moment with Jonathan from Ecological. You've done some really cool developments, and I think you go after what we call orphan molecules, you call it. I like the term. You've picked up and developed the chromium cruciferate and selenium cruciferate. I was to pick out two minerals that are particularly besides magnesium, which is the master mineral, they're really essential to normal decreased insulin resistance, or selenium, to glutathione peroxidase activity that protects your brain, your peripheral nerves, your body from hydroperoxy radical and glutathione peroxidase activity, which is probably one of the most important antioxidant enzyme systems in your body. And then, of course, you have copper sabacate, we call it copper Regenemax. Let's talk about these three for a minute, because these are really important minerals that people really don't grasp. If one of the tests that I tell people to do, that if you're a diabetologist, you'll see in pre-diabetics, if you give them a copper load, you can give them copper load with a organic copper compound, and you'll see hyperchromiuria if it's chromium, or if they need it, if there's an imbalance of something, you'll get hyperchromiuria because they can't hold on to it properly, so their dosage they need in order to maintain their insulin resistance reduced to a normal level is considerably higher than the person would otherwise get from a diet. So if you're diabetic or have syndrome X, you've got to take chromium cruciferate. And if you're trying to protect your body from any kind of neuropathy, brain damage, peripheral neuropathy, you got to take selenium cruciferate. And if you're trying to regenerate any solid organ, you take phospholipids, Nutrifos and Neurogen, and essential fatty acids like omega supreme, omega cod liver liquid, etc. You have to take, in addition to our minerals plus, you got to take copper Regenemax, the copper sabacate. So let's talk about these for a minute, because you've developed them. And they're pretty essential, and they're probably some of the highest bioavailable forms of these minerals available. Yeah,
the copper sabacate, depending on how you pronounce it, is a very low-dose 4-milligram pro-copper ligand. It's a complex of copper and sebacic acid, which they found for lysoloxidase, which is the copper-deficient enzyme, that it is the most bioavailable form. Now, people often self-medicate taking lots of zinc, and in doing so, they're harming the zinc-copper ratio by taking too much zinc. There's a reciprocal inhibition between the two minerals. So even if you're not taking copper every day, it's a good idea to have some supplemental form, especially when you're trying to deal with a cold or sore throat and using a zinc-based protocol. Now,
any solid organ membrane regeneration requires copper to regenerate brain, liver, heart, kidney. Any solid organ requires copper. And people don't realize that this ratio is a push-pull thing. If you overdo it with zinc, you knock out copper, and then you create functionally a copper deficiency syndrome.
Yeah, and this is something that you don't want to do, especially for people who are vulnerable to heart disease, because the heart is especially dependent on these copper-based enzymes.
Do you know the model that they use for actually creating congestive heart failure in an animal model? It's a chelating agent that grabs all the copper out of the heart of the animals, and instantly they go into heart failure. Isn't that interesting?
That's so interesting. So you work in basic science, and then you find out what is so important clinically. But those two areas are worlds apart. Now, when you speak about the chromium and selenium cruciferates, these are based on Rutgers Agricultural School, where they grew mustard green plants and other cruciferous vegetables hydroponically. That means just in water with a selenium solution, so that they can measure the amount of selenium that would be expressed in the leaves per unit volume.
Right.
And so you're working with two separate compounds, the chromium and selenium, that is actually metabolized by the plant before you eat it. So this has some advantages over just taking sodium selenite or inorganic chromium, because you're getting it in a food-based form.
Yeah, they tried that. I talked to Steve Levine back, 35 plus years ago at Berkeley, because they were trying to see if it could reverse a lot of the antioxidant enzyme deficiencies that are occurring. And when they tried it, it didn't work. I mean, the body just doesn't know how to take inorganic materials and convert it to an organic state. So if you pass it through a plant system where the plant fixing or microorganisms in the soil convert it in the rhizomes of the plant, and the plant absorbs it, then you have a bioavailable form of these minerals that's going to increase your enzyme activity. And of course, we further increase it with indiamines. Another couple, and I found new applications: ellagic acid, of course, and ferritin. Ellagic acid we use not only for DNA repair but anti-cancer. We also found out ellagic acid is very powerful when it's given with conjugated linoleic acid to make you lose weight like crazy. And we use that along with forskolin. So we have forskolin, ellagic acid, and in our Lepoflush, which is our conjugated linoleic acid. It also reduces the damage to the artery wall and repairs DNA. So ellagic acid is really important. It's part of our cardiac protocols. It's part of our weight loss protocols. It's part of our protection of your DNA, literally antioxidant, and an anti-cancer prevention, but also high dose for people that have cancer to take ellagic acid. So let's tell a little bit about ellagic acid and of course ferritin, which is the best form of iron to take for getting your iron level back up.
Yeah, the ferritin is an animal iron, and when you take a ferrous sulfate or other inorganic salts of iron, you're lucky if you absorb 3%. That's why so many people get nauseous, including those who are prescribed iron for preeclampsia and pregnancy.
Right.
So this is only a 5 milligram, and it's interesting, in Mediterranean countries, there's a ferritin-based iron deficiency that's a genetic issue, and it's only responsive to ferritin as a ferritin salt.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? That's fascinating.
And in mentioning the ellagic acid, we originally looked at pomegranate leaves, but we found a much more concentrated source. And if you're dealing with oncogenes and genetic repair, we face insults that are carcinoembryonic antigen inducers through caramelized sugars, charbroiled foods, toasts, all those things that create cellular insult.
Right.
We need to promote repair, and ellagic acid is known to do that. So those who have a genetic predisposition would respond well to it, and we're using the Terminalia tribulia source of ellagic acid, which is a lot more potent than the pomegranate.
In fact, it flies off the shelf so much because we have so many protocols now. It actually, in a B-scan ultrasound, will actually heal the artery wall, so you actually see it thin out. It repairs capillaries and small vessels in the body, and we use that along with several other things. There's some really neat things. You have the seroflozyme, which is a serratia peptidase enzyme from silkworm. And we, of course, have a separate form called Inflamex, but you can just get the silkworm enzyme separately to break up interfascial adhesions in tissue. We have the sphingolin for myelin sheaths for people with MS, but also for central and peripheral dysmyelination. And a lot of people think it's only MS where you get a dysmyelinating disorder. If there's myelin delay in child development, you can use sphingolin to help, along with phospholipids, Nutrifos Neurogen, and copper sabacate, again, along with our Minerals Plus. We have the one Spilkes, which is the Yiddish for the calcium magnesium for pins and needles, as an anxiolytic, which is a calcium magnesium taurate. And of course, one of my favorites is magnesium taurate, is very, very, very powerful. Tell us about magnesium taurate, because this is I call a twin to our other magnesium glycinate. Tauric acid works in the heart and in the brain, doesn't it?
Yes. In fact, there's 5 textbooks on taurine in seizure disorders, which led neurologists to look at its anxiolytic properties. You can use it in restless leg syndrome or as a calming effect, insomnia. Magnesium is a macro mineral. It's not a trace mineral, so we need a lot of it, just as we need calcium. And it's probably the greatest macro mineral deficiency that you will find in our diet. And
Right.
that's one reason why this preponderance of AFib and other arrhythmias. And instead of using it as a treatment, look at it prophylactically. And this is the most bioavailable form, magnesium
Right, and of course,
taurate.
the other thing you introduced me to is your DAN protocol, which is CDP, choline, uridine monophosphate, and fat-soluble thiamine. And that protocol is very, very good at helping, along with other things, to reverse autism, memory disorders, and people with pre-dementia or head injuries. Amazing research you've done in development of all these nutraceuticals, Jonathan, and we've incorporated them in many protocols. We have to have you back on soon, and thank you for coming on today.
Glad to be here. Always a pleasure with you, Dr. Bill. You're a brilliant man.
You're very bright yourself. You have many talents, and I really appreciate the ability to incorporate them in our protocols. Coming up in hour number 3, we are going to be joined with Tim Alexander, our geopolitical analyst, and the craziness going on with the debates.